It's a pleasure to be here. This has been an amazing couple years in terms of disaster response, so I'm excited to share what we've been doing. But let me just give you a little bit of background of how I even got here. So when I was doing my PhD, I was looking at work on the use of social media in disasters. And then when I started working at USGS, the first project I got a chance to work on was called the Tweet Earthquake Dispatch Project. So essentially what we did was we'd mine Twitter for any time people tweeted about feeling an earthquake. And essentially, what we were able to do was detect earthquakes faster than our seismometers. So that's pretty incredible. So all those blue dots are basically all these Twitter detections that were faster than our seismometers. And that was what we were starting to see, is the fact that we all are carrying sensors with our mobile phones on us all the time. We're also providing this information in real time that can really help with seismologists in this case, other emergency responders around the world. So what's been really interesting and unique is in the last couple of years, especially with Hurricane Harvey, people are realizing when 911 goes down that essentially people are turning to social media because at least it's putting the need for rescue out there somewhere. And hopefully someone will find that information and help them, because it might be very difficult to otherwise get that help by staying on 911 if it fails. So we saw an incredible amount of shift and innovation in how people were trying to share information in new ways. There's also a variety of different platforms that are enabling this. So we've got various social media tools, mobile devices, and there's these amazing digital humanitarian networks, all these digital volunteers that have existed for at least since 2010 with the Haiti earthquake, wanting to help, wanting to figure out ways in which they can provide assistance remotely and virtually anywhere around the world. But one of the challenges when I started working at FEMA in exploring how we could operationalize crowdsourcing at the Federal Emergency Management Agency was various typical misconceptions that people had about what crowdsourcing was. So one, they often said, well, we cannot trust social media or data from the public. But one of the things that we started to realize is as these various digital volunteers are looking at social media and curating that information for emergency management purposes, so a lot of official agencies are posting stuff on social media, not just their website, in part because it's a much more real-time way of getting it out there, and it's a much faster way of getting information to a wide group of people that follow you. Also, it's not about how accurate the information or if you can trust it. It's the fact that this information is more real-time and timely. It's that we can also validate this information by looking at an image. And there's other ways in which if a bunch of people are saying this, it must be true. So there's a different way in which we need to think about it. But most of the time when I first came into FEMA, it was, oh, you're doing crowdsourcing? That means you're doing stuff like social media monitoring, right? Or listening, such as what public affairs or external affairs kinds of does. But really, crowdsourcing is about actively engaging the public, engaging in a two-way feedback loop in a meaningful way. And that's something that we were really trying to point out, is it's not just monitoring social media, it's really engaging people in a specific task. Also, official data, people often assume, is more accurate than the crowdsourced data. But data from the official channels often take longer, and it's not always accurate. I think we assume that authoritative or information from officials, from federal agencies are accurate. And really, they always have some error. And we need to kind of rethink that sometimes there's other ways in which to get this information faster, or different kinds of information that might not be available through traditional channels. So also, digital volunteers have verification protocols. They have ways in which people can understand the validity of that information, where it's coming from. So what we've been doing is engaging with a wide variety of digital volunteer networks and partnering with other agencies working in this field. And how this all started was with Hurricane Maria. I mean, there was Hurricane Harvey and Irma. Those were terrible earthquakes, but Maria was that perfect storm. It really was a situation where the administrator, Brock Long, said, you know, that we need help in a variety of ways. And we got support from the Office of Response and Recovery in FEMA to really explore how can we operationalize crowdsourcing. So we've had a variety of activations, and after Hurricane Maria, we began developing a playbook to kind of explore how we can do this in practice. We've had 3 other activations since then for Hurricane Lane, Florence, and Michael. And so what I want to do is just give you an example of some of the specific kinds of work that was being done. One of the my favorite example is the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, because they've been doing this for a long time. And essentially what they do is leverage all these volunteer mappers around the world to map areas, especially those that are not well mapped. And Puerto Rico was a very particular example where, you know, what happened before any OpenStreetMap mappers came in was completely empty. And so through tracing satellite images of the roads and buildings, specifically 1.4 million buildings and 45,000 kilometers of roads was completed by 5,400 volunteers around the world. It's an incredible effort, and a base map is so important in emergency response. And just that volunteered effort, that crowdsourcing of geographic information is really helpful in this case. Now, when Hurricane Maria happened, one of the particular cases where we thought it was a good way in which to show how could we provide useful information in comparison to the official efforts was the need to find the status of 71 hospitals in Puerto Rico. So in 36 hours, these standby task force volunteers of 55 or so volunteers updated about 33 of the 71 hospitals, whereas the official side had 30 of the 71 hospitals. And then over time, fairly quickly, these volunteers were able to get 63 of the 71 hospitals, as well as all these other unlisted health facilities that the official side did not yet get. Those that had dialysis centers or treatment, very unique kinds of things. And, you know, even though you might think, oh, you know, they were searching on social media, they were using official information, other kinds of information, just really curating it all in one place. And that was the key, in an interactive map. So since then, we've been developing this crowdsourcing playbook. It's got a series of processes and protocols of how do we engage with digital volunteers. It's got a roster of all the digital volunteer networks, a catalog of tools that are commonly used by these digital volunteers. And one of the things that I really want to point out, we're trying to update FEMA-specific doctrine just so that it's started to be a part of their, you know, particular doctrines that they use. But this is something that we hope that the digital volunteer communities can also leverage and adapt for their own purpose. And one of the things that is really important is those different collaboration tools that we need to use to really engage with these digital volunteers that was not possible in the typical FEMA environment. So using Google Drive, which is typically not allowed, any Google Cloud service in certain agencies, Zoom, a web conferencing tool, and Slack. Those are really key in enabling collaborations. And in this past year, FEMA's been really trying to figure out how can we find a way to collect the kind of information that's needed. So they really reoriented a lot of how they share and produce these senior leadership briefings during disasters at the National Response Coordination Center through these community lifelines, these critical lifelines. And it's on safety and security, food, water, and sheltering, health and medical, energy, which is power and fuel, communications, transportation, and hazardous waste. So I always had a hard time remembering what ESF, or essential support function number, is what. And I think this was a much more specific and helpful way, easy to understand way of what kind of information that's needed across any disaster. So during Hurricane Michael especially, we developed these crowdsourcing and social listening reports. Something that we were asked to do was how can we combine our crowdsourcing efforts with the social listening reports that External Affairs was producing, because a lot of people thought they were similar in monitoring social media. So we made that effort. We produced these reports twice a day. And it was reviewed by the situational awareness section chiefs at the National Response Coordination Center. And then it was sent to all of the staff members in the NRCC, including the FEMA top level managers. So this was a really important way in which we were starting to get our crowdsourcing information to the rest of the emergency management community. And then since then, it's been shared to various other folks on the ground, as well as across the agency, especially in the recovery efforts. So we really tried to incorporate more images. The social listening report was very much text-oriented. We really wanted to figure out how can we communicate our crowdsource efforts and the changing aspects of how these crowdsource products were changing over time, how it was providing updates every single day in different ways. Oops. So one of the things that I just recently finished actually was a crowdsourcing unit map journal for Hurricane Michael. And this is something that we're hoping to develop during each disaster so that this is a real-time product that people can go to and get updates on. So it's separated by the different lifelines. There's a series of different interactive maps here, and I can show you a little bit in a demo just after this talk. But it's a really great way to try to bring all the resources together and communicate the wide variety of digital volunteer efforts. And this is not just digital volunteers doing this. This was also leveraging the private sector crowdsourcing platforms like Waze and GasBuddy. Those specifically were already starting to be integrated by the GIS unit at the National Response Coordination Center, where they actually already integrated those two dark black maps. Integrates the live feeds from Waze and from GasBuddy. So this is a real accomplishment and really starting to get some of the crowdsourced data into these official products that GIS is developing. So sorry about that little snag there, but these were the variety of accomplishments we had. We were having daily coordination calls. We integrated our work with the GIS unit so that we had interactive maps. We integrated with external affairs to combine our listening reports. We actually had seats. We were deployed in the National Response Coordination Center, and it's becoming more official, which is really a huge, significant progress that we've made since the start of this. And we also have been working with the NBEOC, the National Business Emergency Operations Center, where they work with all the other private sector companies. So this is really, for me to be here, an opportunity to try to work with other private sector folks that are working in this area and expand that relationship. So here's citizenscience.gov is also a really great resource of all of our federal crowdsourcing and citizen science projects. Feel free to email me here at USGS, but also this FEMA crowdsourcing address if you're interested in more. And I'll just briefly show. This is the citizenscience.gov website. It's got a catalog, our community of practice, and a toolkit. And then again, definitely feel free to check out this interactive resource that we developed for Hurricane Michael. So thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have a question for Sophia while I pull up the next presentation? Go for it.
So you plug into Waze and GasBuddy. Is that just an API connection? That's it?
It's a little more complicated, and so with each company, it might vary in how they feel comfortable about sharing the data based on the agreements that have been made between FEMA and that particular company. So this is an evolving relationship. We've actually just had a conversation with Facebook. Facebook has been developing disaster maps on things like network coverage, where people are moving, safety check data, a whole variety of products. And so currently they're just sharing it with relief organizations, but this is something where, developing that relationship, figuring out ways where we can mutually provide mutually beneficial products.
One more question? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, very much.